first and obvious question is, what does the album title mean?
It's just RoLaJaFuFu, rock, Latin, jazz, funk, fusion. It kind of speaks for itself in a way. I mean, the thing is that I knew that this record wasn't going to be picked up by some record, company, at least not initially. Who knows what could happen, but that I was going to put it out myself, and so I knew that I wasn't going to have people telling me, well, you need to, do this kind of music, or you need to do that kind of music, or you need, it has to have this concept or that concept. So I just felt much freer about how I was going to go about it. I mean, it's not haphazard, the stuff that's on there, but it's certainly a pretty broad palette, and that's intentional, so that I just felt like I just wanted to write music and use compositions, from my past or to fill certain gaps that reflected sort of what I enjoy playing, which is not just one kind of thing. And I know that sounds kind of like a ubiquitous cop-out or something, but it's really, there's not that many guys that are as, sort of, I don't know, to put it in a, sort of a egotistical way, that are, as proficient at as many styles as I am, in terms of making it feel good. Not so much in terms of soloing and improvising, but just making that particular style feel good. That's kind of been my bread and butter. Even as over the years as a sideman.
With your previous albums on labels, were you really being guided by people, and were you really being sort of told what to do? Well, certainly not. The last one was less so. The one called Unfinished Business. But in the previous ones, that I did for labels, they were like, man, you got to have some groove stuff on. It's got to be funky, blah blah blah, and not that I was opposed to that, because I like that, but it just was a little bit constricting, And I certainly, don't worry. I mean, on all my records, I get, I got my licks in terms of composing. Composing stuff that I thought was more had more meat, more depth than just a little groove with a blues lick on top of it. That's just never really interested me. Some of the early comments about the record right now have been, people talking about the compositions and stuff, and that means so much more to me than the guitar playing thing. I mean, I've sort of, I've done, as I'm 60, so guitar. Hopefully, I don't have that much to prove, as a guitar player, but still, as an artist, I think the area that I would love for people to consider is the composing. Tell me about the creative process of this album in terms of bridging this diversity and actually mapping out these pieces.
Okay, well, see that the trick is always, and Duke Ellington knew this, is always writing music for the players, and I think that's the best way to get your vision realized is to make sure that you are considering the strengths of the various people that you've chosen for a particular tune. And in my case, I mean, the core of the record is drummer Marvin Smitty Smith, who's another incredibly versatile musician. He's probably most well known for the work he did early in his career as a swing drummer, as a real jazz, drummer, and but it's interesting. Like one of the most sort of pop tunes on the record, or groove-oriented, however you want to put it, is a tune he wrote called "Baby, What You Want Me to Do," and it's like he's just playing meat and potatoes on it, nothing else, and that's a tribute to his ability as a sort of a chameleon, But but to answer your question though, there's areas of this record is the closest thing that I'm ever going to do to what you would call a jazz record that actually has, 4/4 swing on it and stuff like that, which is, that's just not anything that I've ever even thought about doing. I've never even thought about saying I'm going to do like a quote unquote straight ahead record or anything like that. So this record is kind of, for me, was an opportunity to really explore the more sort of improvisatory type of forms, so that we have there's tunes like, the first tune is like a little jazz blues with an insane head. That's more of a sort of a kind of a fusion shuffle head thing, and then just turns into a regular G blues, which basically I wrote the tune as an opportunity for me to just play some G blues, and then the tune like McCoy is just it's a vibe, and it's a sort of a tapestry of that type of kind of Latin jazz feel that was kind of prominent in the 70s and stuff that certainly I was obviously influenced by McCoy Tyner on that tune in terms of the feeling of it, and so that's just an opportunity, to another opportunity to explore a sort of extended form improvisation type thing. Of course, there's the tune "Philly Man," which is I guess that's the newest composition. I just wrote that a few months before we recorded it, and that's to anybody that probably knows, that's clearly an homage to Pat Martino, and who I was incredibly influenced by when I was a kid, especially like in my college days and stuff. And that tune was probably the most terrifying for me in terms of, because that one's really truly a sort of jazz head with a jazz, chord changes, and so I've been, I've done that on other people's records a bit, but never on my own record. So that for me, that was, it was exciting, but it was also a little scary, and then there's, Freedom Song, which is a very complex song in 3 that Smitty, another one of the tunes that Smitty wrote on the record, and that gave us an opportunity to sort of, me and Jerry Atkins and Marvin Smitty Smith all went to Berkeley at the same time in Boston, and there was a kind of a jazz fusion sort of sensibility that, and around that time period, like again around the late 70s, that really comes out. It really, if those people that were around then, I think are going to recognize that sort of feeling from that tune, and that's, you know, so as far as my, as far as the compositional aspect of the thing, I think probably the tune that most represents the, you know, the sort of elegant and more mature elements of composition on the record is the tune I wrote for my dad. It's called Old Soldiers. And that one, again, I mean, you know, it's a, you know, there's a lot of extended improvisation, but that's mixed with a, you know, a lot of sort of crafting and arrangement that that would sustain itself through three movements and build. You know, that the trick with that one was making such a long form, you know, sound sort of have a contiguous story. You know, even though it's in three movements, it kind of has a start to finish kind of build to it. And Hadrian Farrow, in my opinion, plays one of the greatest fretless bass solos I ever heard. You know, on that tune.
How do you initially, you know, from conception to getting to the state of being ready to record, how do you sort of capture that initial inspiration and then arrive at the next phase?
I think, you know, that's a tough question to answer because I think there's not one answer for it. But I think there is, for me, the thing that I've learned about writing over the years is that two things. One is that I don't hurry anything. So I'm not going to just finish something because it needs to be finished. You know, I'll just wait until I, you know, if I'm not inspired by the events that followed the initial inspiration, I just wait. But that's one thing, you know. But I think the other more important thing that sometimes is lacking in today's music, not, you know, although there's, you know, as soon as I said that to myself, I've been thinking that there's been some real resurgence of quality composing, you know, and arranging in jazz lately. But the point that I'm trying to make, though, is that I think for me it's about melody. So in other words, if I hear a melody, then I have to have the confidence in myself that the things that come around it will sort of reveal themselves, as opposed to the other way of, you know, sort of writing a groove and then trying to figure out how to fit a melody into what it, you know, like, or some, you know how people want to write some cool chord changes because, oh, these are neat, they sound interesting and they're cool, but now you have to figure out how to sort of, contrive a melody over it, you know, and not that that's not a bad way to compose either. It's just that it's more precarious to me because I don't think it's much more difficult to come up with something that that rolls off the tongue, you know, as a story.
This album has a massive all-star cast on it. Talk to me about the choice of musicians and, you know, how the tracks came together, pulling in, you know, these different people into these different universes.
Right. Well, nowadays, obviously, it's a lot different than it used to be because, you know, we can fly tracks all over the world. But having said that, most of the tracks on the record were done at Musicians Institute in Hollywood, and they have, you know, got a great studio there and a great engineer, T.J. Helmerich, who's he's done a number of great recordings, and is actually a great guitarist himself, you know. But having that resource, you know, because that's the thing, is it's when you can get the guys in a room, you know, and play together, whether you even use all those tracks or not. Just the fact that you got the really good bass and drums on there that sound honest and sound inspired makes such a big difference. Another really important thing is that I would say that 95% of the people that played on that record already knew those songs, in whatever song they were playing on, knew it intimately already, because we had either played it live, because we played it live, So let's see, the lion's share of tunes were done, like I said, at MI, and that's with Smitty on drums, and then with a number of different bassists who all played gigs, like none of the rhythm section was played with anybody that never played a gig playing that music.
Yeah.
So that's a big deal, and that's from doing, me sort of being bi-coastal, my roots are in New York. And so, I played a lot of gigs in New York with the guys from New York, like Skylar Deal and Rocky Bryant. And then, of course, George Whitty, who I played with the Brecker Brothers, and also with Chris Mindoki. And then, like the guys out here, which is sort of the core of the record, like I said, is Jerry Atkins and Marvin Smitty Smith, and then, Hadrian lives out here now. Ernest Tibbs lives here. Rene Camacho, who played the acoustic bass on McCoy, is also out here. And then who else is? Oh, now here's the funny thing: is the band that I use in Europe is still Smitty on drums, but the bassist is the incredible Lindley Marth, and so it's Lindley Marth and Smitty, and then the vibraphonist Bernard Maselli, and violinist Mateusz Pliniewicz, and those guys, I've done 2 or 3 tours with that band. But here's the interesting thing, at least it's interesting to me, is that the one tune on the record that you would think would have to be live in the studio more than any of the others, I would, if I was just listening to it, and I, as a lay listener, I would think it would be Silly Man, because it's it's like kind of a sort of a bebop-y kind of thing, but that tune, because of the logistics, because they got guys in France and Poland and all over the place, I couldn't get them all together in one room, so we all recorded that to this like crappy sequence that I did, and then replaced, started replacing parts. And the most interesting thing to me is that the bass was done before the drums. And so it's, when you listen to what Lindley plays on that recording, it's that much more amazing, because he sounds like he's imagining the growth and the story. What, you know what I mean? It actually being there, So that I just that's incredible to me, And then that tune "Beaten Silver" was done. That was one that I've been, I've had laying around since the '80s. That tune, that actual recording, and I had to resurrect it from some ADATs, and I knew it was great, and I just hadn't listened to it in a while, and I don't know why I never put it on another record, but that recording we did in a little studio in Manhattan, and it's live,
you know, with Richie Flores, who's, you know, just, he's, you know, you probably know of a percussionist, conguero named Giovanni Hidalgo. Yeah, well, Richie is kind of like that in this, like, in people mention him in the same sort of sentence as, and rightly so. And Richie was a lot younger than Giovanni, but they sort of played in the same. You know, Richie was like this, like a, you know, just like a, you know, child prodigy. You know, who, you know, there's recordings of him playing with these like really huge, like Puerto Rican salsa bands and stuff, like when he's like 12 years old, and it's just the maturity and the depth and the just unbelievable chops and power. It's just incredible. But anyway, so Richie, that was, you know, Richie was on that, and that's one of my favorite things on the record, even though it was so old. You know, it's just because of, you know, when you do records and, you know, you never know what, you know, even though you have great hopes for all your compositions and things, you never know which one, like, is going to just go bang and have this magic.
How do you direct these amazing musicians, whether it's in person or virtually, to, you know, reflect your vision and also hopefully encourage some magic?
I think that's a tricky thing. I think that you owe it to them to have a direction, so that they are not just in this amazing, you know, speedboat, but with no helm. You know what I mean? It's like, you know, you don't want that. You want them to have some sort of point that they can look at that's going to inspire whatever it is that they think is what you're trying to accomplish. And that's the thing. You know, I've played with a lot of people. You know, I won't mention any names, but years ago, when I used to do more sessions for people and stuff, I was doing a session for someone, and they said to me, you know, Dean, can you kind of give me this, you know, like a Larry Carlton kind of thing here? I was like, I mean, I didn't even know how to respond because, you know, I mean, it's like, I don't play like that, you know, and Larry's incredible, but I did have Larry's number. And so I just said to the guy, listen, I got Larry's number right here. You should call him. I'm pretty sure he could give you a Larry Carlton thing, you know. But I'm saying that to say that I don't like to tell guys how to play or you know, or what to play, as so much as to just tell them the story that I'm trying to tell. You know, and that of course there's written note, like, you know, there's bass lines, or I might have a drum figure, for instance, like in Old Soldiers. There's a, you know, it's like boom 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 boom, you know, and I'll just sing that to the drummer, even though it's written on the page. I think, you know, like the oral communication of that type of stuff, sort of like, you know, in Caribbean music, you know, or in African music or stuff, where you just sing it how you want it to someone, and most musicians speak that language much better than they speak this sort of, you know, semi-quaver, you know, Phrygian mode, all of that type of sort of academic speak, you know.
You work with guys like Joe Zawinul, so you know how certain people can be.
He's a perfect example. He was like, man, you know, when I worked with him, like I went up to his place in Malibu, right, and we're just recording, and there was, I'll tell you a little story about that. We were, you know, he just said, look, man, play what you hear on this, you know.
you know. And before we would start, he would tell me the story about the song. You know, like this is about a wedding in India that's between two people that are in like the whatever I can't remember but it's like the second to the lowest caste, you know, and he said that's what this song is about, and he described the whole thing to me in a story, like he's just telling the story. He said, and now hit the record button, and here we go. See, that's the type of thing that resonates with musicians. If you got to call the right guys. You got to call guys that have vision, you know what I mean, and have a experience and are confident in their own skin to be able to tell someone else's story their way, you know. And so what? And I'll tell you another thing that happened during that. We were playing, and I said to Joe, I said, I know you said this was in whatever it was, A major or something like that. I can't remember what key it was, but I keep hearing a flat 6 in there. Do you want me to play that? And he goes, and he got mad at me, you know, because he said, look, man, I don't call numbers, you know. I told you, just play what you hear, you know. If that's not, if you can't do that, then you know you're in the wrong place right now, you know.
How did you hook up with him?
With Joe? Oh, well, that was pretty. I mean, first place, I knew a lot of people that had played with him over the years, you know, and we were on the same label at the time, you know. And Joe had heard me, you know, like with with Sanborn and with the Brecker Brothers, and you know, with Marcus Miller and all, you know, a bunch of different people. There was a point, you know, in the '90s. There was a point where I was playing with Mike and Randy and Marcus Miller and Sanborn and Billy Cobham and everybody all at the same time, you know. So
you were unavoidable.
So I wasn't hard to find, you know. But I think you know, Joe. We were on the same label, and so the label manager Joachim Becker. You know, he probably also, you know, had something to do with it. But you know, I think that's probably, you know, I think that's the simplest answer. You know, is Joe always knew me. He always would make fun of me because of my physical movements when I play, and you see me play it, you know, a lot, and I'm pretty free. So I think, but he wasn't making fun of me in a sort of clown way. He was like, matter of fact, when we recorded at his place, he made them move all the chairs and furniture out of the studio. He said, because he goes, you got to give him some room so he can dance, you know, and he's right, because I mean, for me, I can't separate my body from the notes, you know, so he was very intuitive in that, you know, how he wanted to use me, you know, for that particular record.
You are known for this kind of wild, untethered stage presence. Tell me what's going on in your head and how that translates into that sort of physical presence.
Well, I mean, you know, the thing is that I feel like every note is, you know, I don't know. It's kind of like speaking in tongues or something, you know. I don't know how to put it any other way, you know. I don't even know what speaking in tongues really is, but you know, if it was something, that's what it, you know, would be physically. But well,
are you like you feel like you're channeling energy? Like what?
Absolutely, yes, without a doubt. That's it. I'm glad you said that, because I was going to get tongue-tied, you know. So you really actually, that's exactly I'm trying to tap into what I used to call or what I tend to call the flow, you know, and and just stay up in there, you know, and I care really very little about what people think I look like when I'm doing that, which is pretty obvious because I just don't have a filter, you know, because I find when I do kind of filter myself and you know, edit my sort of movements and stuff like that, that I'm not as blissful, you know, when I'm playing. And man, you know, there's no money in this music that I play, so I got to get something out of it, you know. So I want it to be a spiritual experience for me every time.
So what does that mean, spiritual to you?
That's well, again, it's sort of tapping into a higher energy, or not necessarily higher energy, but into a tangible energy that exists in the room, you know, and being able to sort of respect and I'm not. It's not about understanding for me, you know, being spiritual. It's a sort of it's more about being open and giving, you know. It's really hard. That's probably the hardest question you asked, because I don't really question it that much. You know what I mean? It's just, I realize it's there. There's just something there, and I'm aware of it. You know, and somehow I think it's aware of me. And when I'm most eloquent, you know, as a guitarist or a performer, you know, is when I allow that sort of energy conversation to take place.
Well, I wanted to go back to the creative process of the album, just to jump back. We're going to jump back for a little bit here. We're just kind of flowing here. What are some of the bigger creative challenges you face when you write? What are some of the difficulties you encounter?
Well, the first thing is having some sort of initial inspiration, because I feel it's very hard to just make something out of nothing. You know, to just have like a blank sheet of paper and just start writing. Like people think they're going to write a fiction book or something, and you have like, all you have is a pencil and a piece of paper, and that's it, and nothing else. You know, to me, that's extremely difficult. Whereas waking up out of a dream and going, wow, that's an interesting, you know, spin on a particular thought or something like that. Let me write that down. You know, so I think so this sort of initial spark, you know, I think it's difficult. One of the most difficult things is writing without that, because now you have to rely on sort of craft. And not that, you know, obviously you can do some good, quality work that way, but it's not as easy. It's much more difficult when you don't have a spark, you know, to start out with. And then, of course, I think the same thing starts happening again as you start writing, is that you get to a certain point sometimes. I mean, look, you know, every once in a while, man, I write a tune, you know, and I write the whole damn thing just pours out like Old Soldiers, you know. It just poured out. It wasn't like it was, you know, some kind of, you know, gut-wrenching process, you know, other than the fact that I was thinking about my dad, which kind of, didn't make it difficult. It just, it just brought up memories of him. You know what I mean? And so that's a different conversation. But then there's other tunes. For instance, like Philly Man. I had the first part of that tune, the whole thing, just came right out. You know, biddiddle-diddle-ding, bong, biddiddle-diddle-dee-diddle-dee-bong, you know, biddiddle-diddle-doo, biddiddle-diddle-doo, biddiddle-doo, biddiddle-diddle-doo, biddiddle-doo, biddiddle-doo, you know, all of that, all of those notes, it was like, you know, hundreds of notes just came out like nothing, right? Then it was like, now what? You know, and I was like, oh, man. And that took, you know, another couple months because, again, it's for me, it's got to sound like it's a story, like it's inspired, you know what I mean? Not like it's just using craft. And I'm pretty good with the craft aspect of it, you know, because you have to be, because you get in situations where I have to write arrangements for someone or a horn chart or something like that, where you kind of have to use, you know, your wiles, you know, and your experience and your sort of, you know, garnered knowledge, you know, to make something work. But for me, when I'm writing my own music, I'm not going to do that. You know, I'm just not. I'm just going to wait. You know, that's why I don't put out a record every year, because I couldn't. It's just, I ain't got it like that, you know. I'm not prolific, you know.
One of the things I wanted to do was to see if you'd be interested in really walking through your 4 solo albums. You know, talk about sort of the journey you see flowing through the 4 of them leading up to this one.
First one's Here. The title kind of speaks for itself, right? It's like, and the title was, you know, it was one of those, you know, deals where the word here was spelled 2 different ways, you know, because, you know, it was here, like H-E-A-R, like hear it, and then here, which was kind of like, okay, here's my first record, you know, and that record, because of the fact that I couldn't get arrested for 25 years, you know, trying to, you know, get people, you know, get signed, you know, it was so important at that time, you know, to be on some kind of label, you know, that I felt really strongly that on that particular record, I needed to let people know who I was via a lot of the people that I'd been playing with, so that they would have some sort of point of reference. So that's why the record, you know, I designed it, you know, I wrote a song for Marcus Miller, you know, called Gemini to play on, and then I wrote a tune called Back in the Day for David Sanborn, you know, to try to get him to play in a style that he was kind of more known for, you know, when he started to become famous, you know. And then, of course, Billy Cobham was my, you know, first sort of major employer, you know, and still is to this day, by the way. But he's one of the few people I still like to play with, you know. But anyway, and Bill Evans, who I was playing in his band at the time, and he was very instrumental because the label was Escapade or ESC or something like that, right, at the time. And he was very instrumental in getting the label manager to sign me, you know. So, and besides that, I mean, obviously he's one of the truly great tenor players, you know, of our time. And he, you know, contributed, and I wrote a tune for him to play on as well, and then I wrote something for Randy Brecker, this tune called Just for Kicks, and of course he played on the first thing on that record too, which was this. And the other thing about that record was one of the prerequisites is that all the stuff had to have had to have a beat, had to have a groove, and so I had to figure out how to get my licks in as a composer in the confines of a sort of 4/4 backbeat stuff, which was easy for me because obviously I having played with George Duke and Marcus Miller and Roberta Flack and people like that. I know what how to make stuff groove. That's not a big issue. And again, if you got a good melody, a lot of times it can be treated in a number of different ways. So that was the first record. And I know I'm missing a lot of people because there were a ton of people on there. Michael Brecker, played this unbelievable solo on this really cool sort of Afro-Cuban tune that was called Solid, and Don Elias is also on that. As a matter of fact, the name of the tune comes from when we got done recording the track in this little studio. It's funny, we're in this little studio in Queens, right? And Mike, there was no real sort of ISO booth for the saxophone, so he was in the control room, this little team control room, and Mike's tall, but this is a basement we were in, so he was actually had to kind of bend down a little bit to stand up and play, on that particular tune, which was kind of funny, but weird at the same time. But they were so cool about it, because I didn't have any money, at the time. I was just trying to get that song was recorded before I had a deal, and so anyway, that was cool. But so that's the first record. Then the second record was a record called Groove Warrior. That record is, a clear, sort of, at least the first half of it is kind of got this, I guess you would say late 60s, early 70s vibe to it. And it's, obviously the first half of the record is vocal tunes. And so I just really wanted to kind of make a record that kind of reminded me of all of that stuff that was going on at that time, Sly Stone and Mandrill and Crosby, Stills and Nash and of course Hendrix and that type of stuff and Santana, from that period. I think there's a lot of that influence on that record, and that's a really I really like that record, and unfortunately before the record was released, the record company went into bankruptcy, and there was a whole thing, and so it never really got promoted, which is unfortunate because I thought it was as a concept record, it was really cool, and it's just that's how it goes. Layla Hathaway sang on that record, and it was just like I said, it was, and that band was a really cool, groovy band with Bernard Wright on keyboards and Juju House on drums, and of course Poogie Bell playing on drums on a couple of the other compositions, and Marcus contributed on one or two tunes on that. Actually, yeah, he plays there's a tune we still do called Break Song from that record that we still pull out every once in a while, Old Chestnut. Actually, it's funny, that's the song that we used in Chris Mingdoki's band as an encore, or it had been for the for the last few years, you know. Yeah, that's the kind of story. That record, what we did to record it was we went on tour, kind of developed the material to a certain degree, and then as soon as we got off the tour, I booked some time in a studio in Bonn, at a place, a great studio called Hansa House. And so we recorded the lion's share of the tracks there with bass player Booker King, who was playing, electric and, electric acoustic, and Bernard Wright and Juju House and myself. And then the rest of the tracks were done at Hannibal, which is Marcus's studio in L.A. And that was with Poogie Bell and Marcus, and then I got Patches Stewart and Roger Byam to put some horn parts on some stuff, while I was there as well. And so, that was, basically the story behind that record. Then third record was DBIII, and that's a live record with Dennis Chambers and Will Lee that we recorded during 4 nights at the Cotton Club in Tokyo, and it's cool. I mean, we played some material from the previous records, but we also, I did a couple of covers, and we did a nice arrangement of a Beatles tune. We did, All You Need Is Love, and there was that was just one of those things where I just said, hey man, let's just record all this stuff. I don't, who knows what's going to happen with it. We'll just, just do it just to do it, not for a record necessarily. And man, I started listening to the stuff and I went, wow, this is pretty good, So I played some tracks for Will and Dennis and said, what do you think? You guys want to put this thing out? And they were like, yeah, it sounds great. Let's, so I edited it here and there because obviously, live stuff gets a little stretched out sometimes, but so that's what happened with that record. And that one came out in, I think, what was it, around 2008, something like that. I think it's a really good live record, I was pretty happy with it, and sonically and the performances, And I think that's it's unfortunate. I think that live records tend not to sell as well as studio records, and because especially when you're playing sort of creative, whatever you want to call it, jazz or fusion or whatever, you would think that that's what people would really want, because that's the that's how that music really comes to life, is on stage, not necessarily, being sort of gussied up in a studio, But anyway, so that's the story behind that one. Then Unfinished Business. That was the idea behind that record was that over the course of like 30 years or 40 years, of writing and playing, I had a whole bunch of music that I intended for other records, but there just wasn't enough room for it, or blah blah blah. And that wasn't any reflection on the quality of the compositions. It's just that it was just a necessity, So there were these, a number of tunes that I felt like, wow, these are really beautiful compositions, and I hate for them to just never be heard by anybody. So I decided to record a bunch of them, and that's why I called it Unfinished Business. And of course, there's a couple of on all the records, even the live one, there's new and unrecorded material, but on that record, I think it's probably more than half of the tunes were, like I said, these compositions that we'd been playing, even live for a while, or hadn't quit playing because they were just, they were older tunes or whatever. And I said, I'm going to try to find a nice combination of those songs and put them on a record, because I just don't want them to get lost, because they're too nice. Some pretty tunes, man, like that tune Sento para mim, which is like a sort of a Brazilian kind of feeling to it. That's a pretty song. And then there was a tune called Headless Horseman that I really thought came out great. Obviously there's the tunes that, people sort of crowd pleasers on there, like this tune called Just Do It, which has a little bit of a audience participation thing going on at the end. But it's still a cool tune. That tune was inspired by a Donny Hathaway groove called, what's the name of that tune? It was a tune called The Ghetto. Remember that tune by Donny Hathaway? And so anyway, that, but there was I think in that record, I had already started leaning towards the idea that I don't have to have a format, or some sort of a constrictive concept, like this is a funk record or this is a jazz record, or that, that was kind of already starting to sort of, I was starting to feel some elbow room that way, and that's and again, that's the first record that really kind of features the L.A. musicians. That when I say L.A. musicians, are the guys that are living here now, and nobody actually is from L.A. but because Smitty is, he's from the Chicago area, and he came up, as a sort of Boston, New York guy, and so did Jerry Atkins. So that's, I had started doing a bunch of gigs in Los Angeles at the Baked Potato as a sort of a, petri dish for coming up with, new material and revising some old stuff. And so that, the one cool thing about these last two records is that for me, the music sounds like it's played by a band more than perhaps more than some of the previous stuff, because it is. Because like I said, and very rarely have, do I go in the studio with a tune that nobody knows. Usually it's like, here's, we're going in, like when we recorded, some of the tunes from this record, we just go in the studio and play it because we know it. It's not like we're working on like, oh, maybe we should add 2 bars here, and maybe, hey, what do you think about a sax solo here? Speaking about sax solos, Brandon Fields is just fantastic on this new record. He just really, and like, again, he's been playing with us a lot, like in Los Angeles and stuff. So he knows how I phrase, and I know how he phrases now, and he's a very, very creative, very unique saxophonist, and he doesn't sound like anybody except for himself. And I think he's a beautiful voice that kind of reiterates itself in different ways on the new record. But anyway, back to Unfinished Business. So that record was recorded, again, for the most part, at MI, and with T.J. Helmerich as the engineer again. And I did most of my overdubs. I did at the end of a tour with the band. I went back into Hansa. We were in Europe, and I went back into Hansa House and in Bonn, and I did, whatever guitar overdubs that needed to be done. Like a lot of it was already done because most of the solos and melodies and things like that on that record were actually live, just like this new record. I mean, I would say probably 60 or 70% of what I play on the record is what we did during the basic track. And then it was mixed by a great engineer who's actually Hansa House is his studio. It's his name was Klaus Genuit, and he is just he's really great. He's won a number of Grammys actually for mixing. Matt, we get back to I think it might have been the Joe 70th birthday thing with the WDR orchestra. I might be wrong about the Grammy part of that, but I'm quite sure that he did win one for the Brecker Brothers one that was done with the WDR orchestra and stuff. Not that that's that doesn't necessarily mean anything, but it certainly is, I guess, a nice feather in your cap. He could care less. He's a true, he doesn't want to be interviewed by anybody. He doesn't want to, he's just, all he cares about is the music, which is really evident in the quality of his work, So there's Unfinished Business for you, and here we are.
Do you have a perspective on how you've shifted and changed as a guitarist in terms of your approach and philosophy, over the last 30 years?
When I was starting out, I kind of felt like, I had this ability, to sort of assimilate other people's style. I mean, it was very easy for me, to just sort of sound a little bit like, Jimi Hendrix, or a little bit like Pat Metheny or Pat Martino or Jeff Beck or Johnny Winter, or you know what I mean? It was like I could just it was intoxicating for me sometimes to just sort of be something, and get into that, But as I started to get more, not necessarily older, but just more mature, I started to realize that there were certain things that I needed, that certain ways of playing that were flowing more naturally for me, And of course, a style is nothing but you just stealing a bunch of stuff from a bunch of people and then sort of regurgitating it in an honest way by using those elements to tell your own story with, But I think as it, because I used to want to play like, I used to change guitars, play, if I had, play with a jazz guitar, if I was going to play jazz, or play use a whammy bar on a guitar, that type of thing. And as it further along, like I never use a whammy bar. I just don't even. I don't like the thing. I don't like is the whammy bar when it's kind of cool thing, but it feels unstable on the guitar. So I don't like the way that it, like when I hit the low strings really hard, they kind of bend out of tune and stuff when you have a whammy. I just hate that kind of stuff. So I kind of figured out a way to sort of bend strings to emulate that thing. And I don't know. I realized, I think that after a while you start realizing those things that most resonate with the other musicians you play with and with the audience. And so you start distilling yourself and not doing it for a commercial reason, but for the reason of just being able to communicate your story in a more direct, honest way. And I think that's the thing that makes, that I keep evolving towards, and the thing is that there's a couple of sort of things that are important to me. One is that the guitar doesn't sound thin, so I stopped trying to have like 5 million different tones, and just try to have more of a sort of a smaller palette that is really sort of a little meatier, so that it. I don't like the guitar to sound like this little thing. I don't want to sound little. It's not that I want it to overtake the other music. I just don't like the idea that the guitar is this sort of some kind of mosquito shit that you hear in the background. You know what I mean? Of a track that otherwise sounds great. So that's kind of important to me. That thing, and the other thing is I don't worry so much about anymore about whether what I played was perfect or not, but just that whether it was continuous in terms of its conception, And I think that's a thing that you just have to kind of grow into, as a guitarist. But when it comes to, just technically about the guitar, it's like, I'm kind of a more or less an alternate picker, and I think that I kind of got that from the sort of Pat Martino thing, and from people like Johnny Winter and Hendrix, the way that they would play, solos and guitar almost felt like rhythm. Like it actually, where you're hitting more than one string, even though you're only playing one note, that kind of thing. So there's a sort of a continuity between what you do as an accompanist and what you're doing when you solo. It's almost a similar sort of feeling, because the rhythm to me is like just so incredibly important. I probably you heard my pitch on the pledge music, where and this is a thing that I tell students. I teach at MI, right? I teach there a couple of classes of my own curriculum there, like an advanced guitar class and an advanced ensemble. And I always tell them, not only them, but all my Skype students and all and private students and stuff that I have. Look, there's only really 2 rules, and everything else is sort of optional after that. And the two rules is it's got to feel good and it's got to be beautiful. And so those are the sort of guiding principles that I'm using as a guitarist now, more than sort of saying I have to have this, I have to incorporate some other technique or sound or something like that into what I'm doing, unless, of course, it facilitates one of those two things to be better,
We actually haven't even talked about your decision to use pledge music for this project. But tell me about that decision, and also what you'd like to say to all the people that helped you get this thing made.
Well, I mean, I noticed that a few different people that I'm friends or colleagues with were using some sort of a crowdfunding platform for their stuff, and I knew that there was no way that I was going to be able. I knew I needed to make a record, and that I was ready to make one because I had the material, finally, and but I also knew that I just didn't have the resources to make it happen on my own, and so I noticed a few different, like I said, friends of mine that went that route. Dave Weckl, went that route, and Layla Hathaway did it, and so I said, well, let me give it a shot, and I went that, I put up a pledge music campaign, and I got a pretty nice response from people. I still, quite frankly, I still needed, I still needed to get it the rest of the way myself. but without their help, just so they all know, without their help, there's no way I could have made this record, and I would have had to just wait, till who knows when I would have enough money to completely fund the thing myself. So I'm very fortunate that people were inspired enough by what I was offering to help out, because now I can, without a record out, it's really hard to tour anymore or anything. And people think, oh, well, CDs don't sell and blah, blah, blah. And it's not about that anymore. It's about that you have to have a new product just to sort of generate interest amongst the buyers and promoters and stuff like that. And, of course, all of us sell more CDs at the venues we play at than anywhere else now, which helps. It's all a sort of a self-perpetuating thing. It's like you have to continually keep the sort of your own music machine oiled and running, and one of the important aspects of that is making sure that you have new music for people to enjoy. And so that's so it's funny. It's like it's what came first, the chicken or the egg, but it's like the without having the people that are spending their hard-earned money to try to help you out by pledging their support, then they won't have a record, that they can come, because so many people say, oh, come to my town. And it's like, you don't understand. You can't just go there, and set up on the side of the road, and start playing. It just doesn't work like that. You have to actually have, you have to be hired by a venue, and the venues require a certain amount of due diligence when it comes to the promotion of your product, and the biggest promoter of your product now is the concept that you have new music out, or a new, CD, or new downloads, or whatever you want to call it. Some kind of media that's new. So, or at least that's my conception of what it is. So, I'm very fortunate that I was able to get this record done, and a big reason for that is the people that pledged their support on Pledge Music.
I got a few historical questions for you.
Okay.
You're going to probably be surprised at the first one. I wanted you to reflect on your time as part of Tiger's Baku, which is, relatively unacknowledged, but really pretty important band in fusion history.
Absolutely. I mean, how do you know that band, first place?
Well, I'm from Montreal originally, and Tiger would play with the UZEB guys all the time. I go see him. Tiger was almost like had a residency in Montreal for years. Alain Caron would bring him over there,
I played there a million times.
And the albums, you could buy them in Montreal.
You have the one called Mudcake?
Yeah, Mudcake came out on CD. Yeah.
Yeah. It's that's the record I played on with him. But
so tell me about that period.
Well, see now, what's amazing is that that I was talking about that Boston period, right? And that's basically what that is. Tiger was actually teaching at Berkeley at that time. I think he's back teaching there again. But anyway, at that time, there was so much really great music going on in Boston. Between the obviously Pat Metheny and Mick Goodrick and all that kind of thing, and of course Gary Burton and that all that kind of stuff was going on. But then there was this other thing happening, which was this sort of fusion thing that was growing, because obviously, man, a lot of people were younger, and so they had their ear was not just tethered to 4/4 swing, They'd come from different places, and Tiger kind of tapped into that, fusion, jazz rock fusion sort of thing with this very, very inventive compositions and stuff. And his band, the original Baku, was Bill Frisell, and a bass player named Kermit Driscoll, the drummer Tommy Campbell, and a keyboardist named Frank Wilkins. And Tiger wrote the most unique, freshest music that I had ever heard, by especially coming out like I say, coming out of this this sort of 70s thing where it was like Mahavishnu Orchestra and stuff like that, but this music was a little bit more it had some different elements, so that it was where John's music had was obviously there was a huge Eastern influence, right? Tiger's thing, even though there was a Japanese sort of influence in his music, there was this other sort of very melodic thing, that he had happening that really was just very special. Anyway, I'm saying all this to say that his band, Tiger's Baku, was the band everybody wanted to play in.
Huh.
And go see, and his gigs were like sold out, especially the ones early on in Boston. His second band was still Tommy Campbell on drums initially, and a bass player named Tim Landers, and Jerry Etkins was on keyboards, and Mike Stern was the guitarist. And that's the record. That band was the one that made his first record, which was called Tiger's Baku, I guess. I think it's just. But anyway, so Mike, and I had already been playing with Tim Landers and Jerry Atkins and a little bit with Tommy in some different groups, in the Boston area. And so those guys knew me well, And so when Mike, it's funny because Mike got the call to go play with Billy Cobham. So he ended up leaving Boston at that point and moved to New York. And so Tiger asked me to be in the band, which was like unbelievable because there was, there were so many, the lineage. It was, like I said, Bill Frisell, and then Mike Stern, and then myself, and so that was just, it was like kind of like a dream come true. And, it was like, wow, I can't believe I'm actually playing in this band that I've revered, for the last, couple of years. And we went around and, like you said, we played a lot in Canada and stuff. And for some reason, it's always some stupid suit that's never, they can't see the beauty or the validity, in something, or understand how, they listen to records and they don't come and see you live to actually see what it is,
yeah.
Stuff like that, and see how the audience is reacting to it, and it's so for some reason, Tiger, that band never really took off in a like it was never supported by a major record company or anything like that, or by a major talent agent, even though I think he was with a major talent agent, that guy didn't, or that agency, really didn't see what they had, in my opinion, and that band continued to go on. There was a number of different, drummers. By the time that I did some gigs with Tommy, but the lion's share of gigs I did with Tiger were with a great drummer named Robbie Gonzalez, who was most well known for playing a lot with Al Di Meola during Al's sort of heyday. And Robbie was this amazing sort of rock Latin fusion drummer, and unbelievably powerful and so creative. And there's so many drummers, when you mention Robbie, they just can't say enough about how much he influenced the sort of the drum community, and but like I said, it's a strange thing how that band just sort of fell through the cracks, because it's the music that Tiger wrote. And let's not forget that Tiger's just one motherfucker trumpet player. So that's I mean, not even considering that part of it,
We got to talk about Billy Cobham a bit too. It's a huge lineage from the earlier days of your career right through this ongoing spectrum, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 deal. So tell me about the origins of that gig and what it means to you for it to be this ongoing.
It means everything to me because Billy's one of the few people that when he calls, I just say, I just jump. I don't say how high. It's like he's just. He was an incredible mentor to me, to help me become who I am, as a sort of a confident musician, and not because he was being nice.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely tough love, but I consider him a friend. I consider him a good friend, And the thing is that He was looking for a guitar player around in 1981, and Stern had left the band again to play with Miles, and so Mike. Billy had one or two guitar players that he played with a little bit. Barry Finnerty was one and stuff, but he was looking for someone to sort of permanently join the band. At the time, the band was Tim Landers, who we just spoke of from Tiger's group, you know, and it's a small community. You know, when you it's interesting, or at least it was. I think it still is. It tends to be. There's, you know, the cream kind of rises to the top, I guess. You know, especially when you're talking about certain types of music. You know, it's you got to get the guys that know how to do that. You know, but then it was Gil Goldstein, who you know, the incredible composer, arranger, piano player, who was in the band, and just tell you the quick story of how I got the gig. He was holding auditions at SIR in New York, and I was living with Tim Landers and Robbie Gonzalez at the time in an apartment on the like around Midtown on the east side, and Tim had said, "Listen, man, you know, Billy wants you to audition, you know." And so I told him about you, and so he wants to hear you. I said, "Oh, great, you know." So then I got a phone call from Tim on the day that I was supposed to go there, because Billy had already been auditioning people, you know, that during that morning, and Tim calls and says, "Hey, man, I don't think Billy, wants to hear any more people today. So you're cool. Don't worry. You know, we'll probably take it up again tomorrow or the next day." And I said, "Okay," you know, and so I decided that I would go and, downstairs to the little bodega and grab a 6-pack of beer and watch the Yankees game, and there might have been other influences in my sort of viewing pleasure, to enhance my viewing pleasure, and so I'm pretty enhanced and having just a wonderful time watching the Yankees game, and midway through, about the 5th inning or something, I get a phone call from Tim, and he says, "Get your ass down to get your ass down to SIR, because Billy wants to hear you right now." I went, "Okay," So I go down there, and it was probably a good thing, because I otherwise I would have been so nervous. But he put up this chart that was a tune called Solarization. I'm not exactly sure what record. It might have been could have been from Total Eclipse, or not really sure what record that was from. But anyway, it was in 27/8. And the chart was like at least 10 pages long, and so in my enhanced state, I just started laughing when I saw the chart, because I said, "Well, this is going to be the shortest audition in the history of music, But it was the tune, even though it was very difficult. The actual melody wasn't that difficult over the. It was the groove that was, once you heard the groove a couple of times, you kind of knew where one was, you know what I mean? And so that helped me out a little bit. And then Billy said, and I figured, okay, well, that's it. At least I got a chance to, to play with Billy Cobham once, And then Billy says, hey, man, let's play like a shuffle blues, And he did one of the classic, that kind of, thing that he's famous for, That, and I was like, now I'm in the perfect condition to play that, And so I guess I did pretty well, in that arena. And so I'm packing my stuff up, and Billy had gone out and to make a phone call or something. And he came back, and he said to me, hey, man, I hate indecision. What are your obligations right now? And so I've been playing with him ever since,
The last question is a big wide open one, and that is, if you could encapsulate your driving force as a musician, your reason for being, what would that be?
Oh man, it's it's pretty easy actually. It's the only way that I can get to that euphoric feeling. I can't really get there any other way, And so I don't really do it for money, although, obviously I need to make money in order to be able to do it, But, no, but it's clearly, for me, it's always been, because I don't, subsequent to that little story I told you, I quit, all enhancements, And, so I don't use any sort of drugs or alcohol or anything like that, to just sort of get high, So the only way I know how to get high is by playing music, and listening to music, and so that's that's the short answer. That's the Cliff Notes right there. Is that I'm doing, and this is what I tell students too, as well. It's like music. There's a point when you're playing, and that if this isn't true for you, then you probably shouldn't be a musician. But there's a point where you're playing, where all of a sudden the endorphins start building up, and you become blissful and high, like I can't explain it any other way. And I said, there's no feeling like that, that I experienced any other way, and I've experienced all the other ways. It's just better than that, and it's more pure.